On October 22, 1939, World War II's consequences spread as the Soviet Union tightened its grip over occupied territories in Poland, particularly in the areas now called Western Belarus and Western Ukraine. The Soviets began a harsh campaign to suppress Polish institutions, paving the way for deeper integration into the Soviet regime. While no major military engagements occurred on this day, the political and social actions taken in the Soviet-occupied zones would have long-term implications for the region. Military events. Suppression over combat. While military confrontations were not prominent on this day, the focus shifted to the political and administrative measures being enacted by the Soviet Union. The Soviet military and secret police, the NKVD, began implementing orders to dismantle Polish society. Churches and schools were shut down, Polish currency was replaced with the ruble, and all types of Polish national expressions were repressed. Simultaneously, typewriters and printing presses were confiscated to stifle any attempts at resistance or communication. Across the territories, the Soviets started creating lists of Poles and political figures who would be deported or imprisoned, marking the start of mass repressions, including deportations to Siberia. It was clear that the Soviet aim was to thoroughly suppress the Polish identity in the region and replace it with Soviet ideology and control. Diplomatic and geopolitical developments. Elections under Soviet rule. In a key political move, Soviet authorities orchestrated elections in the territories they controlled, aiming to legitimize their occupation and create a veneer of democracy. These elections were nominally held to ask the population whether they wanted to join the Soviet Union, but they were widely recognized as rigged and served the Soviet agenda. The results were predictable, with the population overwhelmingly voting for integration into the Soviet Union. This step was crucial for the Soviet regime to justify its annexation of Polish territories to the world, despite widespread international condemnation. On the other hand, the geopolitical landscape in Western Europe continued to evolve as neutral countries watched the escalating Soviet actions with growing anxiety. Sweden and Norway, while maintaining their neutral stance, faced the potential threat of being drawn into the conflict as the political situation deteriorated in Eastern Europe. International reactions and media coverage. The Western press reacted to Soviet actions with a mix of alarm and skepticism. Newspapers like The Times and the New York Times published reports highlighting the harsh suppression of Polish culture and the fraudulent nature of the Soviet-controlled elections. These publications also pointed to the wider implications for Eastern Europe, with the Soviets extending their influence aggressively in ways that undermined Polish sovereignty. In the United States, the growing isolationist sentiment remained dominant, as indicated by the Gallup poll published on October 22, 1939. The poll showed that while 95% of Americans wished to stay out of the war, a significant 62% were in favor of providing aid to the Allies, suggesting a shift in public opinion regarding U.S. involvement in Europe's conflict. Projections. The long-term implications. The events of October 22, 1939, set the stage for the harsh Soviet occupation policies that would define much of Eastern Europe during and after the war. The suppression of Polish institutions and forced integration into the Soviet Union not only demonstrated the Soviet regime's ruthless methods, but also foreshadowed the Cold War division that would later split Europe. As the war continued, the people of Western Belarus and Western Ukraine would face increasing Soviet repression, ultimately contributing to long-standing tensions between Poland and the Soviet Union.